pretty incredible band. We're talking about this is episode 80, by the way. Congratulations,
Thank you. Wow, 80. All right.
episode 80, and this is what are we talking about today?
Well, we're talking about the making of the first Doors album, okay, and what went into it. The Doors, to me personally, were the first band that I was ever really into seriously. I don't know what it was. I was a kid. I was probably about 10 years old, to be honest with you. Um, Morrison was dead about 8 7 8 years at that point. But you know, Jim Morrison is such an icon that even years after he was dead in the late '70s, when I was discovering him, his figure, he was still huge. Okay, and I don't know if you remember this, Rob. I know I'm a couple of years older than you,
Yeah,
but there used to be rumors that he was alive.
I did hear some rumor that they thought he faked his death.
Faked his death, moved to Africa. That was always like one thing that was out there. So I don't know what it was. I think probably in 1979 when I got into the Doors seriously, it had to do with some of that, stories, urban legends like that, and it also had to do with if you remember what came out in 1979 was Apocalypse Now,
Yeah,
and for me, Doors music and that movie will always be in my head together. You can't separate it. Anytime you hear "The End" by The Doors, you think of Apocalypse Now. At least I do.
every time I think I'm done myself in, I play that.
Got one lumped up one too many times, right?
Yeah, this is the end, my friend, the end. I think
But
that's a great song.
the Doors are one of these bands that, uh, you know, are just by themselves. They're in a universe by themselves. There's nobody that sounds like them before or after. And I think that people that get into rock and roll seriously, all roads kind of lead back to them, at some point.
Yeah.
Were you a big fan or, growing up or what?
You know what? I always heard the door, like Riders on the Storm, all that stuff from the Doors. Stranger with the
People are
um,
strange.
People Are Strange.
Yeah.
Light My Fire. Step on to the break on through to the other side. All that shit was like, oh my god! It's like repeat, repeat, repeat. Like, oh, that's the shit that my parents used to listen to that I hear as a kid. So
Yeah.
I was like burned out with this shit for a while.
Yeah. No, and I agree. For many, many years, I didn't really listen to them. I mean, all you got to do is put on classic rock radio. You'll get a Doors song in an hour. Okay. But over the last maybe 5 10 years, I've kind of like gone back in the catalog and started listening to them a little bit again, and playing the album tracks, the stuff that you don't hear on the radio, um, just various stuff that you listen to it and you're like, these guys were just geniuses.
Yeah.
Okay, uh, Morrison was doing something
Hey,
that
you want to hear something, by the way? That documentary on Amazon, which I think you should let people know, it's free and you can watch pretty much the Doors album, the first album.
yeah, yeah. It's part of the classic albums series.
Yeah.
There's quite a few of these different bands. They'll talk about a certain album. They'll interview the band and what the guys that recorded it. They'll go into the studio. They'll dissect the songs and everything. Very interesting. And there is one about the Doors, first album,
Yeah.
part of the classic album series, and it's free on Amazon Prime. Check it out. I drew some information from that for the show tonight. Um, what I was going to say is the Doors are like I said. There's nobody sounds like them. They're like in a universe by themselves. But Morrison to me is one of the greatest frontmen ever. Uh, what he was doing with, I mean, the live shows were insane. Okay, but what he was doing with lyrics, the only person that I even think was doing anything similar was Lou Reed. Okay, because Lou Reed was in New York and the Doors were a California band. They were starting around the same time, 1966. Lou had the Velvet Underground, and he was doing something with lyrics based on literature. Okay, stuff that wouldn't be discussed in a rock song. Things like heroin and stuff like that, or people on the street, street creatures in New York City that you weren't going to write a song about. He did. All right. Now Morrison was a poet, right?
Yeah, definitely a poet.
Yeah, and that's where his roots lied. And if he had never been in the band, he would have been a poet.
Yeah.
That would have been his life. And he was as talented in that as he ever was with singing. I mean, he had a fantastic voice, especially the first few albums. Really, as he got further into excess and drinking, the voice isn't as good on some of the later albums. But the first 2 or 3 albums, his voice is on. Uh, he was doing something with lyrics. You listen to these lyrics. This was not the hippie generation.
Nah.
No, they were about as anti hippie generation as anybody. How they got to be so big in the middle of all that, summer of love stuff is amazing.
But
Okay, because they were the opposite.
I
They
know,
were
but I
dark.
don't think the music had this kind of weird soul, psychedelic that
Oh
nobody
yeah.
had at that time either.
No, no. Like I said, and that's because nobody sounded like them. I mean, Ray Manzarek's keyboards drive through every song, and no one had that kind of sound. No one pulled that off.
Yeah, that was incredible. That yeah, that sound was like holy shit, what the fuck? That was very different at that time also.
It's different now. You can listen to these records now, and they're like a time capsule, but they're also fresh. You listen to them, and you're like, nobody ever sounds even close to this. There isn't a band that says, I sound like the Doors. There isn't. You know.
Remember when I told you yesterday? I think the first album was the best album, man.
I when you said that to me, I had to really think about it, and because I never really thought of because there's only a few. There's like 6 albums, I think
Yeah,
they have studio albums altogether, and I think it's just I never really thought about what's their best one, but I have to agree with you. I think it is. I
my,
think it is.
from beginning to end, the album just sink in, and it's
It's
like
perfect.
it's
It's a perfect
perfect.
record. Yeah, true, true. All right, so you want to get into this?
Yeah, what you got for me? Tell me a little bit about. But before we start this, what do you think of Van Kilmer's the way he interpreted Jim Morrison in the Door movies?
You know, that movie I remember got a lot of mixed reviews when it came out.
Yeah,
Oliver Stone had directed it. He's always controversial,
yeah,
and I think he gave a pretty good performance. I thought the film kind of could have been deeper into Morrison's personality more than just the excess, the craziness, the drinking, the drugs, whatever. But one thing I think it did well because Ray Manzarek and the other guys were involved with the film. Okay. And what I think it showed well was their camaraderie as a band. One thing that's very cool about the Doors, and I always like when bands have this attitude, is it was kind of like a all for one for all kind of thing. When they gave writing credits on every album, it was always all the guys, not just Morrison. Morrison might have wrote the song, but
yeah,
he gave credit to everybody else too. And I think that point came across in the movie pretty well.
yeah,
And they also, what's sad about and tragic about it is that they do lose their friend. He does die, and it you see kind of how his excess got to the guys in the band. They watched their friend kind of like fall apart. you
yeah.
know and it's good in that aspect. There's some parts of the film I think is over the top, but it's a good movie. It's a good movie.
Let me ask you another thing. So they were pretty much a four-man band, right?
Yeah.
But when you look at the thing, they had this other guy that played with them once in a while.
Well, one thing with the Doors, if you never really realized it before, is they don't have a bass player.
Yeah,
Okay. But what they would do is they would have session musicians come in when they recorded on albums, because you need, when you're recording, you need that bottom, okay, to fill out the sound.
Yeah.
And a bass does that. But live, Ray Manzarek, played a bass piano type keyboard. I'm going to go into all that.
Oh yeah. All right. So, what do you got for me about this little band name?
The
What's the
Doors.
name of the Doors?
Well, their history, their origin starts in July of 1965 over at the UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television out in Venice Beach, California. Jim Morrison and Ray Manzarek were both enrolled in the school in the same class. And one of their first conversations happened after Ray complimented Jim on his student art film. The art film was being played and everybody hated it in the class, but Ray thought it was like genius. He thought it was pure genius. He loved it. So they became friends. They realized they had some things in common. Morrison mentioned to Ray in that conversation that he was starting to write songs. And Ray at the time was playing keyboards in a band with his two brothers, Rick and Jim, called Rick and the Ravens. Okay. Now, Ray Manzarek was also friends with drummer John Densmore, and he was playing in a band called the Psychedelic Rangers. In that first conversation they had with each other, Morrison and Manzarek spoke of, maybe getting a band together. And Ray was anxious to do it because Jim sang a song to him a cappella that he had just written, and it was the song Moonlight Drive. And he had just written it, and Manzarek was like very, very impressed with it. So there was an early version of The Doors, and it began with Manzarek and his two brothers, and John Densmore with Morrison singing. This went on for a little while in the middle of 65. What would happen is Jim and Rick, Ray's brothers, weren't into it. They weren't into what Morrison was doing, and they felt it wasn't going anywhere. So they left. And they needed a guitar player, so they ended up getting Robbie Krieger at that point. But it left them without a bass player. So that's what I was going to say is Ray Manzarek got a bass keyboard, bass piano type. And he would play that with his left hand and then play his regular keyboards with his right hand. So if you ever watch clips of the Doors performing and Manzarek is sitting there doing his thing, you watch his left hand, he's playing a different set of keyboards than he's playing with his right. He's not just in front of the keyboards with both hands playing the same thing. He's playing bass. He's playing bass parts with his left hand.
Who was this guy, Larry Kinch?
Oh, Larry can. Yeah, I know who you're talking
He was
about.
like a bass player. They would bring him in.
Yeah. What they would do, okay, and when they recorded the album, they, like I said, they needed a bass player, so they ended up getting a guy. The hell is his name here? You're making me jump ahead here. Larry Knechtel.
Yeah, Kaneko, that's what it is.
Larry or Knechtel. I'm not sure how to say it. Knechtel or Knechtel. Okay, and he played bass on the majority of the albums. Sometimes Robbie Krieger would play bass also, but I'm going to go into all that. When we talk about the recording of the album. Now, Krieger had joined up. Jim and Rick left. So now you've got this lineup. They got no bass player, but Ray says, forget it. They were trying to get a few guys. They did audition a few guys, but nobody worked out because they said that when they brought in a bass player to play live, and they sounded like the Animals or something. They sounded like a band with keyboards, but that bass, okay? And they didn't want to sound like that. So Ray Manzarek just had that piano, and he said we could do it just like that. I'll be the bass player. He was that good. He was classically trained.
The piano he played was a Fender Rhodes keyboard bass piano?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it is.
I never heard of that until
this is stuff that, this is stuff that you see in like classical music. Okay, I mean he was classically trained. Jazz, you hear it in jazz. Okay, the thing with the Doors is these guys, they, what they really enjoyed, what they listened to was blues and jazz and some classical, and also like Krieger was into like flamenco music on his guitar. He could play classical guitar.
Yeah.
Okay, and Densmore was into bossa nova music. Okay, and that comes into play in some of their stuff as well. I'll explain it. These guys, their influences were all over the place. Morrison couldn't play an instrument. Morrison couldn't, uh, you know, he couldn't play a guitar. He couldn't do anything musically. All he did was write lyrics. But he was so talented that he could hear these songs in his head, and he knew what it had to be. Okay, and what Densmore and Krieger used to do is kind of like try to listen to him and interpret it and write it out musically. Okay,
Do you know
kind of like
how hard that is to do?
well, that's remember we were talking about Captain Beefheart
Yeah.
in the last episode.
Yeah.
Okay, and it was the same thing. Okay, that drummer that they had, French. Okay, was his name right? His last name's French.
Yeah.
Uh, he had to interpret what Captain Beefheart was hearing in his head. That's hard to do. That's very hard to do. But these guys were, unbelievably talented. Now, one obvious question you might want to ask is how'd they get their name?
Yeah. How did they get their name?
Okay. There's a book by Aldous Huxley, the guy that wrote Brave New World.
Yeah.
Okay. And he had a book called The Doors of Perception. But the reason it's called The Doors of Perception, in that book, there's actually a reference to a book by the poet William Blake. And it was a reference to a poem that it's sort of like a long poem, I think, that called The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. And the quote is, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. So it's a pretty interesting quote. But that's why they call themselves the Doors, based on that quote.
I didn't know that. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. I started looking that up.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting, right?
Yeah, very interesting. That's fun.
Now, starting in February of '66, they had the lineup set, okay, and between February and May of '66, they had a residency at a rundown LA club called London Fog. Now, often their shows would be followed with exotic dances and strippers at this place. That's the kind of place it was. But Morrison, in the beginning, he suffered from stage fright. He couldn't look at the audience. He would do a lot of shows just facing the band. He couldn't turn around and face the audience. He didn't have enough confidence, even in his voice, which, everybody was telling him is great. He just didn't have that confidence. But the 3 months that they were there, Manzarek would always say that those London Fog shows kind of solidified the band. Okay, they became one, and that's when all the magic would start during those 3 months. And as they got more popular at the London Fog, the band had its sights now on the Whiskey A Go Go Club. Now that was a big deal, right? So starting in May '66, they would begin like a several-month stint at the Whiskey. They opened for larger acts that were passing through Los Angeles. One show in particular, a couple of nights, they opened up for Van Morrison's band, Them.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was a big deal. They were getting more popular. They were known as a great live act. Morrison was wild, unpredictable on stage, and never knew quite where he would go with stuff. But it was a great show to see. Okay, so by August 10th of 1966, Elektra Records president and founder Jack Holzman came down to check the band at the Whiskey, check them out. Now, he had actually been tipped off by Arthur Lee, the singer from the LA band Love, who was also signed to Elektra. When he first went down there to check out the Doors, he wasn't impressed for some reason. Maybe it was an off night. I don't know. But it took like 3 times of him to go down there and check them out to realize that they had something there. So the last time he saw them, he was convinced on that, and he had brought producer Paul Rothschild with him to check them out. And Rothschild said, "Listen, I can get this sound down on vinyl. Okay, they were such a great live act. You really just wanted to duplicate that." And Rothschild, excuse me, Rothschild said that he could do it. So Holzman on August 18th signed the band to a 3-record deal with Elektra, and it would begin a long relationship with Rothschild, who produced their albums, and also sound engineer Bruce Botnick.
He was actually a pretty good producer when you look at
Yes.
the history of this guy. So they start off with a very good producer. You know what I mean?
Well, you know something? I'd like to maybe one day do a show on the history of Elektra.
Okay.
Okay. Elektra Records is fascinating, and Jack Holzman is a fascinating guy. They really started off kind of like a jazz label.
Oh yes.
Okay. Yeah. And, like kind of stuff like that, and branched into rock and roll in the mid 60s. Like the Doors were probably one of the first rock bands that they signed. Okay. I don't know which was the first, but for instance, like that was 66. In 68, the Stooges got signed, the MC5 got signed, okay, to Elektra. So Elektra is a very important label in that era when it comes to rock and roll. We should do a show on it.
Yeah, because they pretty much had pretty much most of the pretty popular acts at that time.
Yeah,
You
they
know?
did. They did. And they were kind of it's hard to understand it now, but they were kind of almost an underground label, if there was such a thing back then. They weren't signing. Some of their stuff went on to huge things like the Doors,
Yeah, of course.
but they were kind of known to, you know, take a risk on a band. Okay, I mean they didn't have to give them a three record deal right off the bat.
Nah.
So that was very cool that they did that. Now, that was on August 18th.
Let me ask,
Okay,
as famous as the Doors was, they didn't last very long.
well, Morrison died.
Yeah, but when you talk about them, it's like almost like those few albums that they did. It's like almost like a whole legacy. You think if
Well, it was 5 years. It was 5 years. Okay, and then they made like 2 or 3 other records without Morrison, which are
suck.
not. I've heard some stuff. It's just not the same. Manzarek does a lot of singing. Okay, it's not really interesting. But if you're a huge Doors fan, you want to check it out because the Doors. I mean, Morrison is the Doors and
Yeah.
all that, but his band was amazing. So
Let me ask you, Mike. Imagine if he would have lived in, like, you know what? Those guys had that 5 years. You know how many bands wait to just have that with one album? They can go 30 years, not even do what the Doors did, like in the first year.
yeah, I mean, Light My Fire was such a huge hit. We're going to go into that now. You couldn't get away from it. Okay. And that just catapulted them. If they didn't have Light My Fire, they probably would have had hits, but just not been as big.
Yeah,
Definitely not been
the
as big.
first hit that they took out was "Break On Through," right? Cause
Yeah, right. Break On Through is the first single. I'll go into that in a second. But I want to mention how just what happened 3 days after they got signed. Okay. Now, August 21st, 66, they had gotten signed on the 18th. The band got fired from playing the Whiskey a Go Go. And the reason was because of a little new version of a song that they've been, messing with, tinkering with called The End. Okay. And that was, the lyrics at the end of that song was just a little too much for the owners of the Whiskey to handle. And they got thrown out of the club. If you remember the end
yeah,
at the part of the song where he says, "Father, I want to kill you," and then "Mother, yes, son, I want to fuck you."
yeah.
Okay, and he just, when they heard that live, that song is so crazy. It's like a dirge. It's like a funeral dirge
It is.
kind of song. It's just so fucking dark, and they were like, I can't rave about it enough, but like they were just like a goth band, like the first goth band.
Yeah, because they had like songs that were really dark, and then they had songs that were like so like, oh yeah, let's go out, let's do this. They were very up and down. There wasn't like
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, right. I mean, they would have songs like "Hello, I Love You," "Won't You
yeah
Tell Me Your Name," or "Love Me Two Times," or "Love Her Madly," like that stuff.
yeah.
But
then,
you
then,
know,
then they got
but
some,
then, yeah, then they would have songs like "End of the Night," like stuff like that. And it's like you listen to those songs, and they were just so opposite of the times, you know. But they were huge. They were huge songs. Now, immediately after they got signed, the team of producer Paul Rothschild and sound engineer Bruce Botnick would get together at Sunset Sound Studios in Hollywood. They would record this debut album by the Doors, self-titled album, in less than 1 month, between August and September of '66. So it was done very quickly.
you got
Um,
that's impressive, coach.
yeah, it was, and they had at the time what at the time in the studio was a state of the art 4-track tape machine to use. Okay, now we've talked about 4 tracks, 8 tracks, 16 tracks before. What they did is they would put one track would be the bass and drums together.
Yeah.
Then a second track would be the guitar and Ray Manzarek's keyboards. A third track would be for Morrison's vocals, and then the fourth track was saved just for overdubbing when they had to add in. Okay? So Krieger would play his guitar, but he would also play some bass on the album. But mostly they brought in the session musician Larry Knechtel, like we mentioned. Okay, he was a guy that came in, did a lot of the extra bass parts. Uh, Manzarek would play his bass in the recordings too, but it didn't come across loud enough in a sense. Okay, they needed to fill that bottom when you're recording on vinyl. Um, you know, to just to round, fill out the sound. So Knechtel was brought in. He was a very good session bassist. Rothschild and Botnick decided they needed to have some extra punch, really, on the bass. So the Fender Rhodes keyboard bass. Well, I kind of mentioned this already. He used it with his left hand, and then he played his regular keyboards with his right hand. That's how all those bass parts were done. Now, most songs were done in just a few takes, but the song "The End," which is the last song at the end, is actually two different takes spliced together
Wow.
to make that long version. So they did it in two takes, just that one song. They spliced it. So very interesting. Um, the history of that song, okay, it kind of starts out when Morrison wrote it as like a simple goodbye, breakup song kind of thing, but it just evolved into like this like series of lyrics that just make you, creates like an imagery in your head when you're listening to it. And the killer awoke before dawn. He put his boots on. And you're listening to this. I used to listen to this song as a kid. I was probably like fucking 12, 13 years old with headphones lying on the floor. Okay. And, not too long after that, I discovered pot. And then, that helps too.
yeah.
Okay. So, you know, you have this imagery. And then in the end, it gets into now it's going into Shakespeare. It's an Oedipus Rex thing where the guy kills his father and fucks his mother. Okay.
So
That's just, yeah, I mean, that's just nuts. Okay. And at the time there was nothing like that being recorded. So when
I
he
was shocked that it was recorded back then.
yeah,
And the album.
what they if
Yeah.
you listen to it though, if you listen to it, he says fuck, okay? But they kind of like slur it out. It's not as pronounced as like live versions of it, okay? Um, they had to do that, okay? They had to kind of mix it down a little bit. So when he says fuck, it's like there's a scream in there with it too. So it's not like totally pronounced. Not like nobody knew what he said. Everybody knew
But
what he said.
everybody knew what he said, of course.
Yeah. So the first single was Break On Through to the Other Side. Okay. And unfortunately, it really didn't do that well. It only got to number 126 on the Billboard
I
charts.
was amazed by that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a classic now. You can't get away from it on classic rock radio. But then when it came out, it really didn't make much of a splash. Now, if you listen to that song, it's constructed in a very interesting way because John Densmore starts the song with a Brazilian bossa nova beat on his drums. And he's using his stick to click onto the rim of the drum. So
Oh,
you hear that click.
yeah.
You ever notice that? Like with the bossa nova beat behind it, with one hand he's playing that. Actually, I think you play it with a brush, okay, and instead of a stick, so it gets that kind of like scraping kind of sound. But when you not then you had that clicking pattern with hitting the rim of the drum, and then there's a cymbal pattern hitting it to carry it through. So bossa nova music at the time was coming out of Brazil was very popular, and Krieger liked that sound, and he wanted to somehow incorporate it into it. But Robbie Krieger, he got the idea of the guitar riff on Break On Through from the Elmore James blues song called Shake Your Moneymaker. And that was done also recorded by the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. All right, I think it was kind of that version that influenced Krieger a little bit more than the original, but it's kind of based on some guitar work in that. And Ray Manzarek has like a quirky, strange organ solo in that song. And it kind of sounds like What I Say by Ray Charles,
Wow.
except for a couple of little differences. But you combine all of that, and you got Morrison's dark lyrics in there, okay? And it comes together fantastically. Actually, I shouldn't say it's dark. I don't know if Break On Through is really a dark song. It's more of a positive song, really. He's saying break on through to the other side.
Yeah.
I think it's really more positive. But it's just that delivery is dark, with him. But again, that song really didn't penetrate the charts. So they kind of were thinking, where do we go next with a single? Now, the big breakout hit on the album is obviously Light My Fire. We all know that.
That was
The
huge.
song, what's that?
That was huge. That was
Yeah, I
that was
mean, that
the
broke
one.
them open. Yeah. But the song is over 7 minutes long, and it was never destined to really be a single. That's not what they thought of it. But what was happening was, as the band was starting to get popular, DJs were getting a lot of requests for that song after the album was released. So somebody tipped off Elektra that a lot of people were requesting that song. So they said, "Well, what can we do with it? Can we cut it down to make a single, like a 3-minute song out of it?" So they did that. Okay, and when they had originally got to the studio to record this album, they had like 2 albums worth of material, and it was mostly all written by Morrison. But they realized they kind of needed some more songs for the album. They were going to save songs they had for the second album, like Moonlight Drive.
Yeah.
That was an old, that ended up being on their second album, Strange Days. But Robbie Krieger was asked by Morrison to write a song. He said, "Robbie, you write one." And it turned out to be Light My Fire. Robbie wrote that song. The band loved it. But again, they didn't consider it a hit single. And when Elektra said, "We're going to cut it down to 3 minutes," at first they were like, "No, you can't do that." But they changed their mind. The record company convinced them, "Look, this song can be a huge hit. Do it live any way you want. Make it a 15-minute song live, whatever you want to do. But let's just cut it down to 3 minutes and see what happens." So, when they did that, by July of '67, the album came out in January. By July, that song went to number 1.
Because it was a huge hit.
It was a huge hit. Everybody loved that song. I think people that didn't even like rock music like that song.
You know what's funny about, because Break On Through came out in January, right?
Yep.
the single, and then April they released "Light My Fire," and "Light My Fire" also break me through. Like they if you imagine they would have just started with "Light My Fire" as the first single out of the album, they probably would have been
Out of the gate,
out of the gate.
probably would have. Yeah, it would have been a lot bigger. But hey, look, it was all learning stuff at that time. Okay, Elektra was a great label for them, really, because they kind of knew what to do with this band. Had they gone with another label, who knows? Okay, what would have transpired? Because they were strange. They were a strange band, just in everything they did. But pure genius, And I think the guys at Elektra, like Holzman, knew this. They just sensed it, and they were able to promote them right. They took a big billboard out, or I think on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, of them, of the first album cover, and nobody had done that before, really. Take a big billboard out. So it was really cool. But
And you know what's funny? Like Jim Morrison was kind of a good looking dude. He could have been like a model.
no, he was, and I think that helped with you know getting their popularity because I think the girls loved him.
Yeah, because you see this guy, he looks like a fucking Adonis. It's like holy shit.
Yeah, yeah. He had done those. He had done photo sessions with like half naked, and these things would make it to Rolling Stone magazine and other places. So the girls were checking him out.
Yeah, definitely. You want to hear
You know,
funny? So the song "Light My Fire" is one of the songs that was put in the Grammy Hall of Fame.
absolutely, deservedly so.
You know,
Yeah,
I think the album later on went to the National Library of Congress, and it also had the National Record Registration also. So the album,
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's worldwide recognized as like an extremely important piece of music.
and
You know,
you want to hear something crazy also?
what's
So
that?
in the Rolling Stone 500 greatest album of all time, the Doors came ranked pretty high.
I think it's in the top 50.
Yep, it was number 42,
42. Wow,
which is
wow.
like think about how many albums are for that to be, and then I think you know what they were right on that.
Yeah, that definitely. I mean, and also it was a huge debut album.
Yeah,
Okay, you might have those numbers, but right off the bat,
yeah, it was
they
like
they
4 minutes. They sold 4 million.
yeah, right away. Yeah, I mean that's huge. You know what's funny though? Um, in my life, I've never. I don't know if I've ever met anyone that saw the Doors.
Wow.
I've always wondered that. I've met people that were huge fans, but I'd ask them, older people, I'd ask them, did you go see them? Nah, never did. I don't think they came, they came to the East Coast a lot. I had this conversation with Rick Rivets one time.
They were probably
And,
a West Coast kind of band then.
yeah, but they did tour Europe and they did play, they played Madison Square Garden, but I don't think they did a lot of shows on the East Coast. So I'd love to maybe possibly look at like a list of their shows. I don't think they did that many concerts. It wasn't like, like we talked about Hanoi Rocks doing a show every 3 days. It wasn't like that. So it's funny because have you ever met anyone that saw them?
No,
Yeah,
like
strange.
nobody.
But
Like you know what? I know people that see like Charles Chaplin. I know people that seen
yeah,
nobody seen the Doors.
well, you know what is they started to have a reputation of being like crazy because he got in trouble with a lot of live shows. He got arrested on stage. Okay, the cops pulled him off, said that he was exposing himself, um, or simulating masturbation and things like that, and just for obscenity, for cursing. Um, that's kind of shown a little bit in the Doors movie. Okay, and then there's the famous incident in Miami in I think it was like 68 or 69 where he, supposedly exposed himself then they hit him with all these obscenity, like 4 obscenity charges. One was a felony.
Wow.
So he actually went on trial and found guilty, but they appealed it and they kept appealing it, and then he eventually died. So it ended. Okay, but he could have gone to jail
Wow.
for some stuff that he was doing. That that they say that when he exposed himself, he really didn't. Like he used to wear these leather pants, and he said something like, "Okay, who wants to see my dick or my cock?" Something like that, and he like put his finger like through the zipper from the made it look and it wasn't his dick, but people were saying it was, but
Wow.
they were not asked to play Woodstock.
They,
Okay, they were not asked.
wow.
Yeah, they were huge in '69. Okay, so I think they had a bit of a reputation of being crazy, but getting back to the album, I want to talk about 2 songs that were the cover songs on the album.
Dude, what do you think the Beatles felt about the Doors when they came out with this album?
I've heard that they were fans. I've heard that the Beatles liked the Doors.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, in fact, when this album came out, the highest it ever went was number 2, and that was in September of '67. Guess what was number 1?
With who?
Sergeant Pepper.
Oh, that was number.
Talking so, they were kind of like, you think about the albums came out around the same time, and you weren't going to stop the Beatles with that. So they were number 2 right behind them.
But that's not a bad thing.
No, I mean, the Beatles, for God's sake, right?
Yeah.
But now the 2 cover songs on the first album are "Backdoor Man,"
Yep.
which was written by Chicago blues guy Willie Dixon, and originally recorded by Howlin' Wolf.
Yep.
The second was a song called the Alabama Song, and that was originally written by 2 German guys, Bertolt Brecht and Kurt Weill. Okay, and it was for a 1927 German opera called "The Rise and Fall of the City of Mahogany." The lyrics in that, he changed it a little bit. Okay, when he says, "Show me the way to the next whiskey bar."
Yeah.
Okay, in the original, it's "Show me the way to the next little dollar."
Okay.
And then I think there's actually a line that says, "Show me the way to the next little boy." I mean, we're talking about German Weimar Republic cabaret music.
Yeah, I heard.
So there was a lot of gay stuff in there, but he changed it. "Show me the way to the next little girl."
You know what's funny? It's amazing how the back door was originally done by Howling.
Howlin' Wolf recorded that. Yeah.
And next week we talk about Captain Beefheart that people thought it sounded like the guy Wolf.
Yeah. He was Beefheart was totally influenced by Howlin' Wolf. He emulated his voice.
Yeah.
That's what he was trying to do.
And then we'll talk about the Beatles, and we talk. I tell you, connect everything that you don't even realize.
I know. I do that all the time. Now, again, getting back to the Alabama song, the lyrics were changed a little bit, but Ray Manzarek plays a very strange keyboard instrument on that song called a marxophone.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, it's called a marxophone.
Yeah,
okay?
That's great.
It's kind of it's weird. It's a weird instrument that you play. It has strings on it, almost like a mandolin guitar.
Yeah.
Okay, but it also has keys that you press.
Wow.
All right, and it makes this kind of sound. I've never seen one in person. I've seen pictures of them. They're probably like super expensive. Okay, and not really meant to be used in rock music, but he used it in this song, and it's fantastic. Light My Fire was skyrocketing. Okay, like I said, the album was number 2 in September of '67, but in September 17th, '67, there would be a very historical evening for the band, and this would be their appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show.
And what an appearance it was!
what a clusterfuck it became.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, they were invited on to the show. based on the hit "Light My Fire," and they were going to perform that song. Um, Sullivan, who actually I think didn't know who they were. Ed Sullivan's an interesting guy. Half these people that he had on, he didn't even know who they were.
Nah.
Okay, but the show was so popular that if you went on it, you'd be made. Okay, the whole country watched Ed Sullivan every Sunday night, so it was a huge thing. So they go on, and before they go on, the producer of the show asks them to please change a lyric for Light My Fire. Now, the lyric that they had a problem with was "Girl, we couldn't get much higher."
Yeah.
All right. Now, it was a drug reference to them. Okay, and it probably is. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
They wanted Morrison to sing "Girl, we couldn't get much better." Okay, and they agreed. Okay, and they basically they were being told, look, bands do this all the time. All right. The Rolling Stones have a famous change in "Let's Spend the Night Together."
Yeah,
Okay. He says, "Let's spend some time together."
yeah.
All right. And every time, if you watch that clip, every time Jagger says it, he rolls his eyes.
You want something about that? That's the time that song they also use it a lot of time on the radio. Let's spend some time together.
Well, they had to change it. So, people were saying, all right, just change the lyric. Jagger did it. It's no big deal. And more, yeah, they just kind of said, all right, yeah, we'll change it. But when they went on, when they got to that part, Morrison didn't change it. Okay. And he kind of emphasized the higher part of it. Okay. The higher part of that lyric. So the show producer flipped out after the show and he said, you'll never play excuse me, you'll never play the Ed Sullivan Show again. And
Wow.
Morrison supposedly said to him, "Hey man, we just did the Ed Sullivan Show." All right, so they didn't care. They didn't care.
So they never came back to Sullivan.
Nope, that was it. They never came back. They would be on other shows. The Smothers Brothers would have them on. Jonathan Winters had a show that they would be on. They were doing like some promo videos and things like that would be shown, but they never went on Sullivan again, and they didn't care.
They didn't need it.
Nope.
So here I got some of the numbers and stats. Check this out. Just this album, like Argentina, they sold 30,000 albums. In Canada, they sold 400,000 albums. In France, they sold 900,000 albums. They were 3-time platinum in fucking France. Germany, they sold 500,000 albums. Italy, they sold 50 million albums. Spain, 50,000 albums. In Spain, 50,000. Italy, 50,000. Sweden, 50,000. Switzerland, 50,000. Then they go to the the UK, and they sold 600,000 albums. And then in America, they sold 4 million albums. Just this album alone.
Yeah, right.
That's worldwide.
That's huge. It's huge. It's huge. But you think about it, the Europeans kind of didn't catch on with them right away.
No.
Okay. I think it took a couple albums for them to really appreciate the Doors, because I think they didn't do their first European tour maybe till the second or third album at the soonest. And, they had already had some big hits here already at that point. But France loved them, particularly in Europe, which is why he kind of ended up moving there at the end of his life.
Yeah, and you want to hear something funny? This album was actually well received, Mike. Do you know that?
It was by critics. Yeah, critics
in
America. Amazing. Yeah, I mean they liked it. They got it. They saw it for the originality that it is. Okay, and some of the best record critics out there were raving about it.
Yeah.
I want to mention something. I don't know if you ever read the book No One Here Gets Out Alive, written by Danny Sugarman?
No, I heard of it, but never read it.
Yeah, I mean that, talking about when I was a kid, when that book came out in 1980, this book was huge. I mean, it was kind of like everybody that was into music was walking around with this book. And, that was at the time. I remember people were saying, Morrison's going to come back. He's still alive, stuff like that. And, but that book was, used a little bit references from it in the movie. But there's a lot more in there. And do you know the circumstances around his death at all? You ever read about it?
I think didn't he die like in the shower, taking like a hit of acid?
No, he wasn't. Well, he died in the bathtub. Okay, was taking a bath, and his wife Pamela found him. Okay, um, they kind of insinuate that in the movie, uh, they don't know. They just find him dead. Okay, but during the movie, they do bring up some points that he was doing heroin. Okay, he was dabbling in that. Uh,
Alex.
he may have overdosed on that, and that might have killed him. But Pamela, his wife, didn't order an autopsy. Okay, apparently in France you could do that. Okay, in America, I think when someone dies of an overdose, it's like mandatory. Okay, but in France, they buried him in like 2 days. Wait, cremated him actually. Oh, he's cremated, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, but he's buried in that cemetery. Okay, in France, in Paris. I'm not sure if he was cremated. I don't remember, but he was buried there in France. Now, years later, he would be removed. He's not there anymore. He's in America. His family removed him because it became such a. You ever see the grave? It's like all graffiti all over it.
Yeah, it's almost
Stuff
like
like.
what.
Hello.
Sorry about that. So they moved the grave to America.
Yeah, they ended up. His family moved the grave to America because it was always getting desecrated over there in Paris. You know.
Yeah, I was
You
talking.
know.
I was comparing to like Gigi Zanin's grave that got destroyed. That they just had to take it.
Yeah, yeah, but this went on for way more years than that. Okay, it went on for probably 30 years before they moved it, maybe 40 years.
So what people would just go? Where did they put it? Where is the grave now?
It's in America. I think it might be Florida or something, or somewhere in the South. He was you know about his family, right? His father was an
What happened?
admiral. His father was an admiral,
Oh yeah.
and his father was behind the whole Gulf of Tonkin incident.
Holy shit! I did not know that.
Yeah. So, that's like now we're tapping into our conspiracy shows. Okay. Because we talked about how the Gulf of Tonkin incident was faked. Okay. And it might have been part of that MK Ultra stuff with the CIA.
Yeah.
All right. And his father was involved with that.
Think about. You know what I was watching that they talk about all these people's father that they were admirals or
Frank
captain.
Zappa, Frank Zappa's
Yeah.
father worked in a secret location place in California.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
and all these guys' son became famous singer and musician. They all have people that went in the service. How crazy is that?
yeah, yeah. I don't know about Morrison though because he didn't have a good relationship with his family. Okay, when he started out uh, in the film school and then got the band together, he hadn't been talking to his family for a while, and he actually, in his official bio for Elektra Records, he said his parents were dead.
Wow.
Yeah, and it really, his father. It took many years for him. It was after he had died that he would recognize his son as a talent. There's a letter that was made public, years later, that was written from his father, the admiral, to him, to Morrison, telling him like, don't get involved with music because you don't have any talent.
Wow.
So they weren't very supportive. There was one show where his mother showed up, but to see him perform, but he wouldn't see her. So.
Yeah, so he
Whatever.
had a bad relationship there. Did he have any
Yeah.
brothers or sisters?
No, I think he was an only child. I think so, if I remember right.
Damn.
There's that whole story too where he with the Indian. Do you remember this?
What happened with the Indian?
He must have been about 6 or 7 years old, driving through the desert with his parents. Because his father was an admiral, they bounced around a lot. And I think they were moving to California or something.
Yeah.
And they were in the desert and they saw an accident, a car accident. And, there were a lot of people around the accident. And there was a Native American guy that I think, if I remember the story right, he was about to die from
Oh,
the accident. And
wow.
they saw this all passing. And the guy was on the road. And Morrison said, and he said this for his entire life, that the soul of that Indian went into him.
Oh, shit.
Okay. And as a kid, he felt the soul came into his body. And he always, was interested in um, like shamans, okay, shamans, right?
Yeah.
And, Ray Manzarek has said on numerous occasions that, you know, watching him perform live, you were witnessing a shaman.
That
That
he
he
got
was,
possessed.
yeah, yeah.
That
So that's, he felt it. He felt that that was part of his whole thing. What he used to do in the early days of the Doors, he did a lot of acid,
yeah,
and
so
they would
he's
all,
definitely
yeah, I mean, they would all go out to the desert and trip, but he would have these visions of, Native Americans and things like that. He would go into these rants about that, and it became part of his mythology. You know what I mean?
yeah, which is amazing, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting guy. Uh, you know, Nobody like him. Part of the 27 Club, right?
Yeah,
you
which is
know,
amazing. Like that list of the 27 Club. Who are we missing? The 27 Club.
well, Janis Joplin.
Yeah, we haven't done
We
her.
we didn't done a show on her yet, but we've done the others. Kurt Cobain, right?
We did Hendrix.
Hendrix, Kurt Cobain, and that's about it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's coming up. It'll be 50 years next year that all that happened.
Yeah, you know what's funny? Because they would talk about that they released the Doors 50th birthday. I mean, 50th anniversary
In
of the
60.
original album.
Yeah, yeah. It's come out a few times over the years.
First they had the
Remastered.
40, then they released the 50th.
Right. They've
I
remastered.
guess they reaching the 60 soon, right?
Not yet. That'd be in 2026. Yeah, that's coming up 6 years from now.
Yeah,
Come.
like 6 years from now, it's coming. 60
Yeah.
years, and then you know what? And then the album still have pretty good record sales for an album that's been out that long.
It's like I was saying at the beginning of the show. I think people that get into music, think about when you get into music. You're in your teens, right? Pretty much.
Yeah,
Me, I started a little bit earlier, but basically by the time you're 13, 14, you're getting into music. Everybody discovers the Doors somehow, some way. You might like a band and say, okay, well, what influenced them? Oh, well, the Doors. Okay, so you just end up, all roads kind of go back to the Doors because they're one of the most important bands ever. Okay, um, I think it's just an attraction for people that are kind of outsiders, you know, like people that are kind of like different. Like I said, in some ways, the Doors are almost like a goth band.
they
Okay,
were.
some of the stuff that they sang, okay, would be kind of, that sentiment would come out in the '80s with bands like Bauhaus and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you
Okay,
know what? Funny, they took an album the same year. The Strange Day album came out the same year,
yeah, I mean they were putting out a lot of albums in a short time.
and that album I think did pretty good, right? Not as
Not
good
as
as the first one,
No,
but
not as good as the first one. Um, you know, the, the the critics love the first album and the last album, L.A. Woman.
L.A. Woman's a great
Okay.
fucking album.
Yeah, yeah. But it's not my favorite. It's not. It's not. I like Strange Days better than L.A. Woman.
Yeah, Strange Days good, but I like L.A. Woman. But to me, the first one to me was the cream of the crop. To me,
Yeah.
that was the album that.
You know what's my second favorite
Which
after the
one?
first album? Waiting for the Sun, the third album.
Right. Okay, that's a good
Okay.
album too.
Yeah,
But
that's got Not to Touch the Earth on it. I love that.
there's something about these 11 songs that they clicked and worked so
Oh
good
yeah.
together.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Perfect.
think about it. The album went worldwide. It was like like people that didn't even understand what the hell was singing bought it.
Yeah, and that was based on Light My Fire. Okay, being so big, everyone bought the album with the other stuff on it. Now you got to wonder, like, what the average person, maybe like a housewife that loved Light My Fire, went and bought the album and then like listened to the end.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh shit! What the hell is this?
Yeah. You know what? You know what I wish they had like the Japanese sales because the Japanese must have loved these guys.
I don't think they kept records like that in those days with the Japanese. I think that didn't happen until maybe 10 years later.
10 years later, I figure,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, you never would hear about it. I don't know if in the 60s
Yeah, because
you
of
had to be
Vietnam.
you had to be like really really big to play Japan. And they may not have even you think about it like
Did
did
the
the,
Beatles ever play Japan? They did,
no,
right?
I don't think they did.
You know what?
I don't think the Stones did either until a lot of years later.
You know what I think? I'm telling you that now, and the reason I'm telling you that I think the reason that happened maybe it was after Vietnam, and then maybe it was after they got blown up. Maybe Japanese didn't wasn't ready for American pop culture.
There might not have even been places to play, in the 60s in Japan.
Maybe.
Well, Godzilla stepping on everything, right? No, but I mean, in the 70s, you had, Budokan was the place a lot of bands play. Cheap Trick got big there.
That's what I was saying. Cheap
Hits
Trick
would be
got big.
big.
They just played that area. I was like, whoa,
Yeah,
how?
yeah, but that was 10 years later.
Yeah,
So I thought it's a good question. I'd like to look that up and see why that was. I wonder when the Beatles and the Stones first played Japan. It probably wasn't until the 70s, I bet.
probably because they must have loved them because because these people were like iconic. And then if you
Yeah,
throw Cheap Trick in there that went out there, or
yeah,
maybe it's like one of those things. Maybe they discovered the fucking Doors later. By the time hey, we want to book the Doors, they're dead.
yeah. They're dead. Yeah, maybe.
Because it's funny. Saudi Arabia asked for all these wrestlers. They asked for the Macho Man. They asked
Oh,
for Rick Rude, and
they didn't
Vince
know
is
they were
trying to
dead.
explain to them, they're dead, right?
They didn't know that.
They didn't know.
Oh wow, wow. What do they watch reruns? I mean, they watch old tapes and shit.
I guess so, but they always ask for the old school guys. It's
Oh
amazing.
wow, wow. So what's the next show we got, Rob?
So the next show we have, let me look at the notes right now because this was pretty good. This was an easy going. We did over an hour again. We're trying to get a habit that we're doing over an hour for these shows, man.
I don't know. Nobody's complaining.
No, they do good. The next show we doing it's the Bauhaus.
Bauhaus. No wonder I mentioned them. I was thinking about that.
Yeah, so we got the Bauhaus, the Suite, the Slade, Gary Glitter, and the making of the Beatles Revolver.
Wow. So September's going to be a hot month with that. Cool. All right.
Yeah, man, sounds like a good. Hopefully, what's the last show that we did? Did we did the Pretty Things?
I think Captain Beefheart was the last one we did.
Yeah, but we did the Pretty Things, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we did that. You know what? I got so many notes here that I'm going through. I'm like, Jesus Christ, we've done a lot.
Yep. We've been very busy, man.
So with the next taping, we're done with August, and then we hit in September again. You know what? We got a lot of shit planned for in October and November, December. We're just gonna roll the shows out, and I hope you people enjoy it. Like always, Mike, if they have any questions or how can they reach you?
Okay. Well, we mentioned it the last couple of weeks. I'm going to mention it again. We got a group page now for the Rock Show podcast. on Facebook. It's called the Rock Show Podcast Group Page. And you can go on there, and I post a song of the day, song of the night, live stuff, anything to do with music. I'm putting stuff up all day long. You guys feel free, join, post what you want. Just keep it all about rock and roll. It's the group's been fun. We had a live video kind of conference thing with a couple of people a few weeks ago. We're going to do that again in July. Right, Rob? We're going to do
Yeah,
that again soon.
yeah, we're definitely doing one in July, probably the second week or third week of July.
Yeah, and we want your opinions. So go join the page and tell us what you think. If you have ideas for some shows or you want to see me do something in particular, just let me know.
Yeah, and follow Mike on Twitter because he put the song of the day. He also do the same thing on Instagram. If you follow Rocker Mike on any of these things, you're gonna be surprised at some of the music and links that he give you. It's a lot of shit that he does. And then on the rock page for the Facebook, he's gonna start doing record reviews. So
yeah, I've
look
done a
out for some
couple of
record
record
reviews.
Yeah, I've done a few record reviews. I'm gonna do more as I have more time to do it. You can find me on Instagram, Rocker Mike 212, and Twitter, Rocker Mike 3, and then on the Rock Show podcast group page, and also on regular Facebook under my name, Michael Baker. So, Rob, where can we find you?
And you can find me on anything Getting Lumped Up. You look up Getting Lumped Up on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You'll see either my face or you see something that puts you to a link to Getting Lumped Up. I also like to plug the brand new Pro Wrestling Tee / Getting Lumped Up is where you can get your merch for the show. Mike is working on a rock shirt right now. I'm waiting to see what's going to be the final verdict. So we're probably going to get a black shirt with white letters saying the Rock Show from the Ramones to whatever, with Punk to Live or something.
Yeah, we got a couple ideas we're floating around.
So once that's done, we'll put that shirt up. And then we're going to put a conspiracy shirt up too.
Yeah, a lot of question marks.
And yeah, this is the way you guys can help support the show so we can put some money, get some equipment and stuff. And pretty much that's all.
Yeah, that's what we got for this week. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And remember, have a great 4th of July. This is past the 4th of July.
We're way past the 4th of July. We're approaching Labor Day.
We're Labor Day. Have a great Labor Day. Enjoy your Labor Day weekend. And it's funny, if this thing would have happened, we probably would have been on the Bauhaus show, right?
Yeah. We had tickets for Bauhaus. We're doing a show on them next week. We had tickets for a show at Radio City, but the pandemic killed that. So hopefully,
Where was that? Where was that show?
I think it was like June 22nd or 26th. It was last week.
Yeah, so we probably would have been seen and talked about the show a little bit and then do all the stuff for the show because we probably would have been right scheduled. We do Bauhaus next week and we probably would have seen it. We would have talked about the show that they had live.
Yeah.
But we did see Peter Murphy live.
Yeah, we did. We saw Peter Murphy do that live Bowie set.
So we'll talk about that next week because that was interesting.
Definitely talk about that.
All right, Mike, have a great week. And remember, don't get drunk, get lumped up.